My name is Olivia Emerson, and I'm 32 years old. At our family's charity gala in front of 200 guests, my sister stood up and announced, "Go sit somewhere else. This table's for family, not adopted kids." The room laughed. She meant it. I quietly paid the $3,270 bill for the entire table, stood up to leave, and that's when the family lawyer appeared with a sealed envelope that changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. I'm curious where you're watching from and what time it is there. Share in the comments below. Let me take you back to that night when 24 years of being treated as less than finally came to an end. The Emerson name meant something in Boston. My grandfather, Richard Emerson, built a real estate empire worth $500 million from a single brownstone he bought in 1962. The family compound in Beacon Hill, a $15 million testament to old money elegance, hosted governors, senators, and Fortune 500 CEOs. Every October, the Emerson Foundation Gala transformed the Ritz-Carlton Ballroom into a display of philanthropic theater. Crystal chandeliers cast light on Hermès gowns and Brioni suits. The auction items started at 5 figures. The champagne, Dom Perignon, naturally, flowed like water. That night, the tables were dressed in fret linens that cost more than my monthly teaching salary. Each place setting featured Baccarat crystal glasses and Christofle silverware. The centerpieces alone, white orchids flown in from Thailand, cost $2,000 per table. I remember standing at the entrance, watching Madison work the room in her $12,000 Versace gown, her Patek Philippe catching the light as she gestured. Mother, Victoria, never mom to me, wore her signature Chanel suit and the Cartier necklace grandfather gave her when she married my father. The Emerson name opens doors that money alone couldn't, grandfather used to tell me. He'd built more than wealth. He'd built a legacy. The foundation had donated $200 million to education over 30 years. The family business employed 3,000 people across New England. But here's what the guests sipping their champagne didn't know. I was the only Emerson at that gala who actually worked with the children our foundation claimed to help. While Madison managed brand partnerships and Victoria sat on boards she barely attended, I spent my days teaching art to inner-city kids. The irony wasn't lost on me, or, as I'd later discover, on grandfather either. I was 8 when Richard Emerson became my grandfather. Not by blood, that was Madison's exclusive claim, but by choice. My parents died in a car accident, leaving me with no relatives and a foster care placement. Grandfather's first wife had been my mother's teacher, and somehow that connection led him to me. "Blood doesn't make family, loyalty does," he told the judge who finalized my adoption. Madison was 4 then, the miracle baby born after years of Victoria trying, the golden child who actually carried Emerson DNA. For a few years, it almost felt real. Grandfather taught me chess in his study, helped with homework, and hung my drawings in his office. Right next to Madison's finger paintings, he'd introduce me as my granddaughter Olivia without qualifiers. Then Victoria started correcting him. "Your adopted granddaughter." Madison learned the distinction quickly. By middle school, she'd perfected the art of exclusion. "This is Olivia, she lives with us." Never sister, never family. When college came, I had 2 paths. Grandfather offered me a position at Emerson Corp, marketing like Madison, or operations, learning the business. Victoria suggested I consider something more suitable for my background. Teaching, she meant, service work. I chose teaching, but not for the reasons Victoria assumed. I'd inherited my mother's gift for art and her belief that education could change lives. Grandfather understood. "You have your mother's artistic soul," he'd say, and for a moment I'd feel like I belonged. The truth was, I'd been keeping his company in other ways. Every Thursday, I'd meet him for lunch, just us. He'd ask about my students, my lesson plans, my dreams. And occasionally, Walter Henderson would join us, papers in hand, discussing matters that required discretion. I should have recognized those meetings for what they were: preparation. The week before the gala, the warnings came in waves. Madison texted first. "Please don't mention your teaching job to the donors. It's embarrassing." Then Victoria's call. "Olivia, dear, the dress code is evening formal. Designer, preferably. The photographers will be there." I borrowed a gown from my colleague Sarah, a navy Oscar de la Renta she'd worn to her sister's wedding. It was 3 years old, but impeccable. Victoria would notice, of course. She always did. Thursday morning, an email arrived from Henderson and Associates. "Ms. Emerson, there is an urgent matter requiring your attention. Please ensure you attend the full duration of Saturday's gala. Documentation will be provided at the appropriate time." I read it twice. Walter Henderson had been grandfather's lawyer for 30 years. Why contact me directly? Why now? "Wear something appropriate, Olivia," Victoria reminded me at Friday's family dinner. "The Whitmore family will be there. James Whitmore specifically asked if you'd be attending." She said it like a warning, not an invitation. Madison laughed. Why would James Whitmore care about— She stopped herself, but we all knew the end of that sentence. That night, I stood in my apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in Cambridge I'd bought with my own savings, and looked at the borrowed gown. My Toyota Camry keys sat next to the invitation. Everything about me screamed, "Doesn't belong" in their world. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Your grandfather wanted you to know he was proud of you. Tomorrow, everyone else will know why. W.H." I should have known that message was more than comfort. It was a warning that 24 years of patience was about to pay off. But I was too focused on surviving another family humiliation to see it. The valet at the Ritz-Carlton looked at my 2015 Camry like it might contaminate the Bentleys and Ferraris. "Staff parking is around back," he offered helpfully. "She's with us," Madison called out from their Mercedes, her voice carrying that special tone of embarrassment. "Just park it somewhere discreet." Inside, the ballroom glittered with Boston's elite. Madison immediately began her introductions. "This is Olivia. She lives with us. Not sister, not family, just a residential fact." At the registration table, I searched for my place card. Madison, table 1. Victoria, table 1. Even Madison's boyfriend of 3 months rated table 1. My name wasn't there. "Oh, there must be a mix-up," Victoria said, appearing with practiced concern. She touched my borrowed dress, a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like inspection. "Sarah's dress looks lovely on you, dear. From her sister's wedding, wasn't it?" How did she always know? "I'll handle the seating," she continued, flagging the event coordinator. They whispered, glanced at me, whispered again. A card appeared, table 12, with the catering staff's +1s and the photographer's assistant. "You'll be more comfortable there," Victoria assured me. "Less pressure to discuss business matters." I watched Madison glide between conversations, her Patek Philippe catching light as she gestured, dropping references to our foundation and our company. The possessive pronouns came so naturally to her. James Whitmore caught my eye from across the room. The Chase Bank CEO had been grandfather's closest friend. He started toward me, but Victoria intercepted him, leading him to the auction display. "Olivia!" a warm voice called. Mrs. Chen, whose daughter I'd taught 5 years ago, waved from table 6. "Lily still has the painting you helped her create. She's at RISD now because of you." At least someone remembered my actual contributions. Dinner service began, and Madison's voice carried across the ballroom. She was telling the Whitmore family about my success story, how generous the Emersons were to take in a poor orphan and give her opportunities. "Of course, not everyone can handle the pressure of corporate life," she continued, loud enough for tables 2 and 3 to hear. Olivia chose teaching, elementary school, art class. She laughed like it was a punchline. "It's admirable," Victoria added, joining the performance. "Someone needs to do those jobs, and Olivia seems suited to it." From table 12, I watched them perform their routine. The waiter refilling my water whispered, "You're the one who taught at Jefferson Elementary, right? My niece had you. She still talks about Miss Emerson." Small kindnesses like that kept me grounded while Madison continued her show. She'd moved on to comparing our achievements. While I was closing the Singapore deal, $30 million in new revenue, Olivia was doing, what was it? Finger painting? Watercolor techniques with third graders, I corrected from across the room. The silence that followed made everyone turn. "How sweet," Madison replied. "Everyone needs hobbies." James Whitmore shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He knew what I knew, that grandfather had personally funded my classroom supplies for years, that he'd attended every student art show, that he'd framed their thank you letters in his private office. "Olivia," Victoria called out, "since you're so good with children, would you mind helping serve the dessert course? The staff seems overwhelmed." The request hung in the air. 200 eyes waited to see if I'd accept my designated role as the help. I stood up slowly, my borrowed dress suddenly feeling like armor. "Of course, Victoria. I've always been better at serving others than serving myself." Madison smirked, missing the edge in my voice entirely. As the auction concluded and champagne flowed for toasts, Madison stood up, tapping her glass with a crystal spoon. The room quieted. "Before we continue," she announced, her voice carrying that boardroom authority she'd perfected, "I need to address a small seating error." My stomach dropped. This wasn't about seating. "Olivia," she called out, gesturing to me at table 12, "you're at the wrong table." But then again, she paused for effect. "You're always at the wrong table, aren't you?" Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Victoria smiled approvingly. "You see," Madison continued, "this table, table 1, is for the Emerson family. The real Emersons. The ones who built this foundation, this company, this legacy." She looked directly at me. "Go sit somewhere else. This table's for family, not adopted kids." The laughter that followed wasn't nervous anymore. It was real. Some guests genuinely thought it was a rehearsed bit, part of the evening's entertainment. I stood up, my legs surprisingly steady. The borrowed dress whispered against the chair as I rose. 200 faces watched, waiting for my response, my tears, my humiliation. Instead, I reached for my purse, a simple Kate Spade bag I'd bought on sale, nothing like Victoria's Hermes, and walked toward table 1, not to sit, not to beg, but because I saw the waiter approaching with the leather folder. The bill for table 1. All 10 seats. The champagne, the wine, the special menu Madison had insisted on ordering. Madison was still standing, basking in her moment of triumph, when I opened the folder. $3,270. I pulled out my American Express, not the black card they'd expect, but sufficient, and handed it to the waiter with a smile. "For the whole table," I said clearly. "Family should take care of each other. If you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong, you'll understand what happened next. Sometimes the universe has perfect timing. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see how this ends, because Madison had no idea what was coming. The next few minutes would change everything, and I mean everything, about who truly belonged at that table." The waiter processed my card while Madison stared, her triumph curdling into confusion. The machine beeped. Approved. I signed the receipt, added a 30% tip, and tucked the copy into my purse. "Trying to prove something?" Madison laughed, but it sounded forced now. "How generous, spending your teacher salary on us." Victoria touched her Cartier necklace nervously. "Really, Olivia, this is unnecessary and somewhat inappropriate." I took a sip of water from table 12's glass, my glass, and set it down carefully. "Consider it my graduation gift," I said, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "From your table and your toxicity." The words landed like a slap. Madison's face flushed. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Chen at table 6 nodded slightly, a tiny gesture of support. I turned to leave, my exit path clear, my dignity intact. 5 steps. That's all I managed before I heard it. Hold on a second. The voice was familiar, authoritative, and completely unexpected. Walter Henderson stood in the ballroom entrance, his navy suit impeccable despite the late hour. Everyone in the room recognized grandfather's lawyer, the man who'd handled every Emerson deal for 3 decades. "Ms. Emerson," he said, and for once, he wasn't looking at Madison or Victoria. He was looking at me. "I need a moment of your time." Madison stepped forward. "This is a private event." "This concerns the entire Emerson family," Walter interrupted, something he'd never done before. In his hand was a manila envelope, sealed with red wax bearing the Henderson and Associates insignia. "Especially you, Madison." James Whitmore stood up from his seat as if he'd been expecting this. 2 other board members did the same. Walter held out the envelope to me. "Your grandfather insisted this be delivered tonight, publicly, after the toasts." My hands didn't shake as I took it. The envelope was heavier than expected. Through the paper, I could feel multiple documents, possibly notarized by the raised seals pressing through. "This is hardly the time," Victoria said, her voice sharp with authority she wasn't sure she still possessed. "Whatever business Richard left can wait until Monday's board meeting." "Actually, it can't." Walter's interruption was surgical. "The board meeting on Monday requires Ms. Olivia Emerson's presence as the new majority stakeholder." The ballroom erupted, not in laughter this time, but in gasps, whispers, the sound of champagne glasses being set down too hard. Madison grabbed the nearest chair. "That's impossible. I'm the blood heir. I'm the one who violated the dignity clause," Walter finished. "Publicly, with 200 witnesses." I hadn't opened the envelope yet, but pieces were clicking into place. The Thursday lunches with grandfather, Walter's presence at so many of them, the email warning me to stay for the entire gala. "What dignity clause?" Victoria demanded, but her face had already gone pale. She knew. Somehow, she'd always known this was possible. Walter gestured to the envelope. "Ms. Olivia, if you would. The room should hear this from you." I broke the seal. The wax crumbled like Madison's composure. Inside were 3 documents: a revised last will and testament dated 6 months ago, a board resolution dated the same day, and a sealed letter in grandfather's handwriting. "Read the will first," Walter advised. "Section 3, specifically." My hands were steady as I found the passage. The room was so quiet I could hear the catering staff frozen in the kitchen doorway. "To my beloved granddaughter, Olivia Marie Emerson," I read aloud, "who understood that family is about love, not blood." "Stop," Madison's voice cracked. "Whatever this is, it can wait. We don't need to air family business in front of the same people you just told I wasn't family?" I kept my voice level, professional. 24 years of practice keeping my composure paid off in this moment. Victoria reached for the documents. "Let me see those." Walter stepped between us. "The documents remain with Ms. Olivia. However, I have copies for both you and Madison, to be distributed after the public reading. Mr. Emerson's instructions were very specific." The timestamp on the will caught my eye. January 15th, 2024, 3:47 p.m. I remembered that day. Grandfather had asked me to lunch, but at the last minute, suggested we meet at Walter's office instead. He'd said he needed witnesses for something. "This was planned," Madison breathed, the realization hitting her. "You manipulated him when he was sick." "Mr. Emerson was in perfect health in January," James Whitmore spoke from table 2. "I had lunch with him that very week. Sharp as ever." Dr. Thompson, the family physician, stood up from table 4. "I can confirm that. Richard passed his cognitive evaluation with flying colors. I have the documentation if needed." The room was choosing sides now. You could see it in how they positioned themselves, some leaning toward Madison and Victoria, but more, many more, turning their attention to me. I continued reading. I leave 60% of my estate, including controlling interest in Emerson Corporation and full directorship of the Emerson Foundation, to Olivia Marie Emerson, conditional upon the dignity clause remaining unviolated by other beneficiaries. Victoria sank into her chair. She understood the implications immediately. Madison was still standing, still fighting, still not comprehending that she'd already lost. The dignity clause, I continued reading, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me, states that any beneficiary who publicly humiliates, demeans, or denies the family status of another beneficiary forfeits their entire inheritance. This clause is immediate and irreversible upon violation. Madison snatched the paper from my hands, her Patek Philippe catching the light as she scanned the document frantically. This is fake. It has to be. Daddy would never. There's video, Walter announced. Every head turned to him. Mr. Emerson insisted on recording the signing. He wanted no ambiguity about his intentions or his mental state. A waiter, the same one I'd given the generous tip to, wheeled in a television screen. He winked at me slightly. Apparently, this had all been coordinated. The video began. Grandfather sat at Walter's desk, looking directly at the camera. His voice was clear, strong, exactly as I remembered it. I, Richard Emerson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revise my last will and testament. For too long, I've watched my biological family treat my adopted granddaughter as less than. Olivia has shown more grace, loyalty, and genuine love for this family than those who claim it by blood. Madison, if you're watching this, it means you've finally shown your true colors publicly. The very act of you viewing this recording means you've already lost everything. Madison dropped the papers. They scattered across the Italian marble floor like fallen leaves. Victoria, Grandfather continued on screen, you still have your 20%, unless you choose to support Madison's cruelty. That choice is yours to make, even now. The camera panned to show 3 witnesses signing: Walter Henderson, James Whitmore, and Dr. Thompson. The screen went dark. The ballroom held its breath. You manipulated him. Madison's voice rose to a shriek. You played the victim for 24 years, and he fell for it. This won't hold up in court. I'll contest this. On what grounds? Walter pulled out another document. Mental incompetence? We have 3 medical evaluations. Undue influence? Olivia wasn't present when the will was revised. Fraud? Everything is documented, notarized, and witnessed. Madison turned to the crowd, desperate for support. You all know me. You know I'm the real Emerson heir. She's nobody, she's just... Just what? I finally spoke, setting down the will carefully. Just the adopted kid? Just the charity case? Just the teacher you mocked 5 minutes ago? Victoria stood, her Chanel suit pristine but her composure cracking. Madison, stop talking. You're making it worse. Worse? Madison laughed hysterically. How could it be worse? She gets everything. The company, the foundation, the money, everything that should be mine by birthright. By birthright? James Whitmore stood up, his voice carrying boardroom authority. Your grandfather built this empire from nothing. There was no birthright until he created it, and he chose to leave it to someone who embodied his values. The security cameras, Walter added, pointing to the corners of the ballroom, have recorded everything tonight. Your treatment of Olivia, your public denial of her place in the family, your violation of the dignity clause. It's all documented. Madison's phone buzzed, then Victoria's, then several board members. The business press had already gotten wind of the story. Someone, probably one of the waiters, had been live-tweeting the entire scene. Boston Herald, Emerson heiress loses fortune in dramatic gala reversal. Someone read from their phone. Madison grabbed her clutch and headed for the door, but not before turning back one more time. Wait! Dr. Thompson's voice stopped Madison at the door. There's something else you should know. Your grandfather didn't make this decision lightly. He investigated everything. The doctor pulled out his phone, scrolling to find something. 6 months ago, Richard asked me to review some concerning emails. Messages where you discussed ways to have Olivia removed from the will entirely. Where you called her, and I quote, a parasite we should have gotten rid of years ago. Madison's face went white. Those were private. Sent from a company computer, James Whitmore added. Richard had it pull everything after an employee came forward about your treatment of staff. Did you know you made 3 assistants quit in 1 year? All of them mentioned in their exit interviews how you treated anyone you saw as beneath you. The room was pulling away from Madison now, physically creating distance. Even her boyfriend had stepped back. The investigation revealed more, Walter continued. The charity funds you claim to have raised? Olivia did most of that work. The Singapore deal you mentioned? The groundwork was laid by a team you later fired to claim sole credit. But the final straw, Dr. Thompson said, was when Richard learned you tried to have Olivia's name removed from the family memorial garden. The plaque he'd installed for her mother, your grandfather's way of honoring the teacher who'd inspired him to create the foundation in the first place. I hadn't known about that. My hand went to my throat, where my mother's simple silver necklace rested, the only thing I had of hers. He knew then, Walter said quietly, that blood didn't make you family. Your cruelty made you a stranger. Victoria finally spoke. Madison, we should go. No. Madison's voice was ice. I want to hear the rest. Walter cleared his throat. Then you should know about the Emerson Foundation restructuring. He pulled out another document. Effective immediately, Olivia Emerson is the CEO of the foundation. The board confirmed this appointment 6 months ago in a closed session. That's impossible. Madison spun around. I'm on that board. I would have known. You were absent, James reminded her. You chose to attend a spa weekend in the Hamptons instead. We had quorum without you. I looked at the document Walter handed me. CEO of a foundation managing $50 million in charitable assets. My students, past, present, and future, flashed through my mind. The foundation, Walter continued, will be refocused on its original mission, supporting art education in underserved communities. Olivia has already been working with Richard on this transition for 2 years. 2 years. All those Thursday lunches suddenly made sense. She's been shadow running the Foundation's education initiatives, James added. The new arts program that launched in 30 schools last year, that was Olivia's design. The teacher retention bonus system that stopped the exodus from inner-city schools, also Olivia. Madison looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. You've been planning this. I've been working, I corrected. While you were managing brand partnerships that went nowhere, I was in schools, with teachers, with children, doing the work grandfather actually cared about. The foundation's assets, Walter announced to the room, will be doubled with a personal contribution from Olivia's inheritance. She's pledging $25 million to create the Richard Emerson Second Chances program. The applause started at table 6, Mrs. Chen, and spread through the room like wildfire. Madison stood frozen as the room she'd commanded minutes ago celebrated someone else, someone she'd just publicly declared wasn't even family. Let me explain the dignity clause more fully, Walter said, his lawyer voice cutting through the applause. Since Madison seems confused about its implications, he pulled out a highlighted page. Any beneficiary who publicly humiliates another family member forfeits their inheritance. That forfeiture is immediate and irreversible. The forfeited assets transfer to the Emerson Foundation's endowment. How much? Victoria's question was barely a whisper. Madison was set to inherit 20% of the estate, roughly $40 million. Walter paused. That money now goes directly to fund scholarships for orphaned children. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted. Madison's cruelty toward one orphan would now fund education for thousands of others. Furthermore, Walter continued, the clause extends to any beneficiary who supports or enables such behavior. He looked directly at Victoria. You have 72 hours to make your position clear, Mrs. Emerson. Stand with Madison and lose your 20%, or acknowledge Olivia's rightful place in the family and retain your inheritance. That's extortion, Madison shouted. That's consequences, Walter corrected. Your grandfather believed in accountability. He wrote, and I quote, "Money without morality is poison. I won't let my legacy become a weapon for cruelty." The security chief of Emerson Corporation approached Madison. Ms. Emerson, I'll need your corporate access cards and keys tonight. You can't. I can, I said quietly. As majority shareholder, effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Your company car will need to be returned by Monday. Madison looked around the room desperately. This is illegal. I'll sue every one of you. With what money? Walter asked simply. Your personal accounts were tied to your inheritance, which you no longer have. The reality hit Madison like a physical blow. She actually staggered. She's not alone in this decision. Margaret Whitmore, James's wife and head of the hospital board, stood up. The Whitmore Foundation stands ready to match Olivia's contribution to the education fund, as does mine. Robert Chen, owner of the largest tech firm in Boston, raised his hand. My daughter still has the painting Olivia helped her create. That teacher changed her life. One by one, others stood. Board members who'd been silent during Madison's reign, employees who'd suffered under her management, donors who'd been waiting for real leadership. We've been hoping for change, admitted Sandra Torres, the CFO who'd reported directly to Madison. Your grandfather knew the company needed fresh perspective, someone who understood service, not just profit. Even the catering staff began to move differently, no longer invisible, suddenly part of the narrative. The waiter who'd brought the bill spoke up. Ms. Olivia taught my daughter for free when we couldn't afford art supplies. She never mentioned she was an Emerson. That's because I wasn't trying to be an Emerson, I said, finding my voice stronger now. I was trying to be helpful. Which is exactly what Richard loved about you, Walter added. He has one more message. He handed me a sealed letter, my name written in grandfather's shaky handwriting. He wanted you to read this when the time was right. I opened it carefully. Inside, his familiar scrawl. My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, then Madison has finally shown everyone what I've long known, that blood means nothing if the heart is empty. You were never the adopted one. You were the chosen one, the one who chose to love us despite our flaws, the one I chose to carry on what matters. The rest is just money. You, my dear, are the real treasure. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. Not yet. Madison thought blood made her untouchable, but she forgot that respect is earned, not inherited. If you believe that true family is about love and loyalty, not DNA, please hit that like button. And if you've ever had your moment of vindication after years of mistreatment, share your story in the comments. Now, let's see how Madison handled losing everything she thought was hers by birthright. Madison's composure shattered completely. She grabbed a champagne flute from a nearby table and threw it against the wall. The baccarat crystal exploded into 1,000 pieces, each one worth more than most people's car payments. You were nothing, she screamed at me. A charity case. We fed you, clothed you, educated you. You owe everything to us. Security, Walter said calmly, but I raised my hand. Let her speak, I said. Everyone should hear this. Madison took the invitation. You manipulated him, played the poor orphan card for 24 years, made him feel sorry for you while you plotted to steal everything. Is that what you think happened? I asked quietly. That I spent 24 years plotting? Madison, I spent 24 years trying to earn your love. I spent 24 years being grateful for every scrap of acceptance. I spent 24 years watching you have what I desperately wanted. Not the money, but the certainty that you belonged. Don't play the victim now. I'm not playing anything. I'm stating facts. You had everything. Loving parents, the best education, every opportunity, and you chose to use it all as weapons. You chose cruelty. Madison lunged toward me, but James Whitmore and 2 security guards intercepted her. You know what the saddest part is? I continued. Grandfather loved you. He loved you so much that he built this dignity clause not to punish you, but to try to save you from yourself. He hoped the threat would make you kind. Instead, you proved him right to protect the family legacy from you. I am the legacy, Madison shrieked. I'm the blood heir. No, I said simply. You're just someone who happened to be born into something beautiful and chose to make it ugly. I stood there in my borrowed dress, facing down the woman who'd made me feel small for so many years. But I didn't feel small anymore. You want to know the truth, Madison? I never wanted your inheritance. I never asked grandfather for anything except his time. Those Thursday lunches, we talked about my students, about art, about Mom, my real mom, the teacher who inspired him to start the foundation. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to find something. Last month, you sent an email to the board suggesting we cut the arts program budget by 60%. You called it wasteful spending on finger painting. That same week, one of those finger painters, a kid from Roxbury, got into RISD with a portfolio we helped him build. That's not... I have the email, Madison. I also have the thank you letters from 300 students whose lives were changed by those programs you wanted to cut. But here's what you don't have: their respect. Or mine. Or anyone's in this room. I turned to address the crowd. I didn't graduate from Wharton like Madison. I graduated from Boston University with a teaching degree. But you know what? I also graduated from Harvard with an MBA, nights and weekends, full scholarship, while teaching full-time. I never mentioned it because I didn't need to prove anything to anyone except myself. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even Victoria looked stunned. Grandfather knew. He attended my graduation, sat in the back row and cried. I looked at Madison. Where were you that day? Oh, right, Yacht Week in Monaco. The company needs a real business person. The company needs someone who understands that business is about people, not just profit. Every lesson I learned teaching 7-year-olds applies to running a corporation. Listen, be fair, share, clean up your messes, and always, always be kind. The room's energy shifted decisively. Thomas Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Industries and Emerson Corp's biggest client, stood up. Emerson Corporation has our full support under Olivia's leadership, he announced. We've been concerned about the company's direction under Madison's influence. This change is welcome. Agreed, said Patricia Kumar, who ran the second-largest foundation in Boston. We're ready to partner on the education initiative immediately. Madison looked around wildly as her world collapsed. The photographers she'd invited to document her triumph were now capturing her downfall. Tomorrow's society pages would tell a very different story than she'd planned. Ms. Madison Emerson, security approached formally. We need to escort you out now. Victoria stood at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. She stood between Madison and me, her Chanel suit still perfect, her composure finally cracking. Victoria, I said quietly, you have a choice. You've always had a choice. She looked at Madison, then at me, then at the room full of Boston's elite watching her decision. Madison, she said finally, we should go. You're choosing her? Madison's voice broke. Your own daughter. I'm choosing to leave with dignity, Victoria replied. Something you should have learned by now. As security escorted them toward the exit, a flash went off. Boston Globe Society photographer had just captured the image that would run on tomorrow's front page, Madison Emerson being escorted out of her own family's gala, while the adopted daughter she'd humiliated stood surrounded by supporters. Wait, I called out. The room froze. Madison turned, hope flickering in her eyes. Your table bill was $270, I said calmly. The tip I added was $981. That money will go to the staff you've treated as invisible for years. Consider it my final gift to you. A lesson in seeing everyone's worth. After Madison and Victoria left, Walter approached with another envelope. There's one more thing, Olivia. Something even Madison didn't know about. The room, which had started to relax, tensed again. Your grandfather maintained a separate investment portfolio in your name. He started it when you were 10, with the $100 you saved from your birthday money to buy art supplies for kids who couldn't afford them. I remembered that. I'd given grandfather my savings jar, asking if he could help me help more kids. He'd said he'd see what he could do. He invested that money and added to it every time you did something selfless. Every time you tutored for free, volunteered, chose others over yourself. He documented everything. Walter pulled out a leather journal. He called it the Kindness Portfolio. Inside were entries in grandfather's handwriting. October 2010. Olivia teaches art at the shelter, adding $10,000. March 2015. Olivia forgoes spring break to help struggling students, adding $25,000. December 2019. Olivia uses her bonus to buy supplies for entire school, adding $50,000. The portfolio, with 22 years of compound interest, is currently valued at approximately $100 million. The room went silent. Even I couldn't process the number. But here's the beautiful part, Walter continued. It's structured as a charitable trust. You can't spend it on yourself. It can only be used for education, art programs, and helping children in need. I laughed. Actually laughed. He turned my $100 into $100 million, but kept it true to its purpose. There's a note attached to the portfolio documents. I read it aloud. Money multiplies when planted in generous soil. You planted the seed, my dear. This garden is yours to tend. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Madison's calling lawyers. She's going to contest everything. Walter seemed unconcerned. Let her try. We have one more document to discuss. He pulled out a folder marked Confidential in red letters. 6 months ago, your grandfather hired a forensic accountant to review foundation finances. They discovered Madison had been embezzling funds, $2 million diverted to personal accounts over 3 years. The room gasped. Even I hadn't expected this. We have the evidence, bank transfers, forged signatures, falsified reports. Your grandfather could have pressed charges immediately. Instead, he waited, knowing Madison would eventually reveal her true character publicly. Why? I asked, though I suspected the answer. He wanted to give her the chance to change, to choose differently. Tonight, she made her choice. Walter's phone rang. He listened, then smiled grimly. That was Madison's lawyer. I've just informed him about the embezzlement evidence. Madison has 2 options: forfeit all claims to the estate and leave quietly, or face federal charges for fraud. Within minutes, my phone buzzed again. Victoria. She's agreed to walk away. We're leaving Boston tonight. I felt no satisfaction in Madison's complete defeat, just sadness for the sister she could have been. The embezzled funds, Walter continued, will be recovered and donated to the foundation in Madison's name, though I doubt she'll appreciate the irony. James Whitmore raised his champagne glass. To Richard Emerson, who knew that justice and mercy could coexist. The room raised their glasses, but I raised mine to something else. To the empty chair at table 1 where grandfather should have been, watching his plan unfold perfectly. To family, I said quietly, both the ones we're born into, and the ones who choose us. 3 hours later, after the guests had gone, Victoria returned alone. She found me sitting in the empty ballroom, still in my borrowed dress, reading grandfather's letter for the 10th time. Madison's at the airport, she said, sitting down across from me. Flying to Dubai. She has a friend there who might give her a job. We sat in silence for a moment. I have 72 hours to decide, Victoria continued. Keep my inheritance and acknowledge you as family, or lose everything standing by Madison. You're her mother. I wouldn't ask you to choose. Victoria laughed bitterly. Richard knew I'd already chosen. I've been choosing Madison over what's right for 24 years. She pulled out an envelope. I'm signing it all over to the foundation, $40 million. Victoria, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I need to. I failed you, Olivia. I let my daughter torture you because I was so afraid of losing her love that I enabled her cruelty. I see that now. She stood to leave. then paused. Your mother would be proud of you, your real mother. She was Richard's favorite teacher, you know. Changed his whole perspective on wealth and responsibility. I know, I said softly. No, you don't. Not all of it. Richard didn't just randomly adopt you. Your mother saved Madison's life once, pulled her from the pool at a community center when she was 3. Your mother died in that car accident coming back from Madison's birthday party. Richard felt the debt could never be repaid. The revelation hit me like a wave. My mother died after celebrating the birthday of the girl who would spend 24 years denying I was family. I hope someday you can forgive us, Victoria said. Forgiveness isn't mine to give, it's yours to earn. She nodded and walked away, her heels echoing in the empty ballroom. Monday morning, I stood before the Emerson Foundation Board, my board now, and outlined the future. The Richard Emerson Second Chances program will provide full scholarships to 1,000 orphaned and foster children annually. Art supplies to 10,000 more. Teacher training programs in 50 schools. The approval was unanimous. Even the members who'd been Madison's allies saw the vision. I'll continue teaching, I announced, surprising them. 3 days a week in the classroom, 2 days here. Real experience with students will keep us grounded in our mission. That's unprecedented, someone said. A CEO who still teaches elementary school? That's the point. How can we make decisions about education if we're not in schools? How can we serve teachers if we don't understand their daily challenges? After the meeting, I drove to Jefferson Elementary in my same 2015 Camry. The principal met me at the door. We saw the news. Congratulations, Ms. Emerson. Or should I say, CEO Emerson. Just Ms. E, I said, same as always. My third graders didn't care about inheritances or boardrooms. They cared that I'd kept my promise to teach them watercolors that day. Ms. E, are you rich now? Asked Timothy, age 8, with the directness only children possess. I've always been rich, Timothy. I have all of you. That's cheesy, said Sarah, age 7. You're right, I laughed. But it's also true. As they painted, I thought about grandfather's words. Money multiplies when planted in generous soil. Looking at their concentrated faces, tongues out as they carefully mixed colors, I understood. These children were the soil. Their futures were the harvest. My phone buzzed with interview requests from major networks. I declined them all. The work spoke louder than any interview could. Tuesday's headlines told the story in different ways. Boston Globe. Teacher inherits empire, keeps teaching. Wall Street Journal. Emerson Corp sees stock rise after leadership change. Boston Herald. From charity case to charity leader, the Olivia Emerson story. But the article that mattered most came from the Jefferson Elementary newsletter, written by my student, Lily Chen. Our teacher, Ms. E, is still our teacher. Emails flooded in. Former students, some now in college, shared how my classes had changed their lives. Parents thanked me for staying in the classroom. Teachers from across the country asked about the new programs. Madison had been radio silent until a message came through LinkedIn. I'm starting over in Dubai. Entry-level marketing. The irony isn't lost on me. I'm sorry for everything. Maybe someday you'll believe me. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt with words alone. Victoria sent a photo from her new apartment in Providence, a modest 2-bedroom where she'd started a small art therapy practice. Learning to serve others instead of myself, her message read. Your mother would approve. That evening, I sat in grandfather's study, my study now, surrounded by the framed thank you letters from students he'd secretly collected over the years. My accomplishments, not Madison's, covered these walls. Walter knocked, entering with one final document. Richard wanted you to have this on your first week as CEO. It was the original receipt from my first art supply donation at age 10. $100. Grandfather had laminated it and written on the back, "The fortune that built an empire. Not the money, the heart behind it. I hung it next to his portrait, where Madison's MBA used to be. The circle was complete, but the story was just beginning. 6 months later, the Emerson Foundation's annual gala looked different. Instead of the Ritz-Carlton, we held it at Jefferson Elementary. Instead of a $1,000 per plate dinner, we had a potluck where every dish was made by students and their families. The auction featured children's artwork, starting bids at $25. We raised more money that night than any previous gala. Madison sent another message. I saw the news about the gala. You turned everything I valued into something meaningful. I'm in therapy now, learning to see people, not positions. My therapist says I was threatened by you because grandfather loved you for who you were, while I always felt I had to earn his love with achievements. I'm sorry it took losing everything to see it. This time, I responded, healing isn't linear, keep going. A month later, she applied for an entry-level position at the foundation, not marketing, teaching support. She wanted to understand what she'd dismissed for so long. I hired her, not as my sister, not as an Emerson, but as someone willing to learn. She started by cleaning classrooms, preparing supplies, observing teachers. The woman who once wore $12,000 gowns now wore jeans and sneakers covered in finger paint. Why? Walter asked when he heard. After everything? Because grandfather believed in second chances. Because cruelty is learned, which means kindness can be too. Because she's doing the work finally. Victoria volunteered on weekends, teaching art therapy to foster children. She never asked for her inheritance back, never complained about her small apartment, never mentioned what she'd lost. One Thursday, exactly 1 year after the gala that changed everything, Madison, Victoria, and I had lunch together. Not as the family we were supposed to be, but as the family we were becoming. Imperfect, working on it, real. On the anniversary of grandfather's death, Walter gave me the final letter. He said to wait until you'd lived with the fortune for a full year. I opened it in the garden where he used to teach me chess, where Madison and I once played as children before she learned I was different. My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, then you've survived the storm and found the sunshine. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you while I lived. I was a coward, hoping time would soften hearts that were hardening more each day. You taught me that family isn't about taking, it's about giving. Madison needed to lose everything to find herself. Victoria needed to lose her comfort to find her conscience. You needed to gain power to show them how it should be used. Blood makes you related, but love, respect, and loyalty make you family. You were never the adopted one, my dear. Madison and Victoria were. I adopted them into my heart because they were born into my life. You were chosen, fought for, earned. Your mother, your biological mother, was my teacher once. 3rd grade. She taught me that wealth without wisdom is poverty. That's why I built the foundation. When she died saving Madison, I knew raising you wasn't just duty, but destiny. The money is just paper and numbers. Your kindness in victory, your grace under cruelty, your commitment to service, that's the real inheritance. That's what will last. Thank you for teaching an old man that love multiplies when divided, that forgiveness is strength, and that sometimes the best families are the ones we build ourselves. All my love, Grandfather P.S. Keep the Camry. It suits you better than any Bentley ever could. I folded the letter, tucked it in my pocket, and went back to my classroom. My real inheritance was never about money. It was about understanding that worth isn't measured in blood or billions, but in the lives we touch and the kindness we plant. And that garden? It's blooming beautifully. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you've ever been told you don't belong, remember this. Your worth isn't determined by blood, money, or others' opinions. It's determined by your character and how you treat people when you have nothing to gain. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear that chosen family is just as real as blood family. And remember, the best revenge isn't proving them wrong, it's proving yourself right. What would you have done in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below.